So we've seen that God can be viewed plurally and God can also be viewed singularly. Man who is made in the image of God can also be viewed plurally and also singularly. In this video, we want to look at some of the way in which the Bible describes man as both a singular entity as well as a plural entity. And then we'll later look at how that relates to how God, in whose image he was made, can also be looked at from these two perspectives. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 24 says, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they," that's plural, "shall be one," that's singular, "flesh." The Bible here is saying that the plural entity of man, they too become one, a singular entity. Quickly, I want to note that this is not speaking exclusively of the experience of Adam and Eve. It might be thought that perhaps this is referring to them because, of course, Eve was taken as a rib from Adam and that was formed into Eve. And so that's why they're one, because they are of the same physical construction. She's just a rib that was formed into a woman, and that's why they're one. But no, the verse says, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother." Adam and Eve had neither father nor mother. This is referring to a later experience. This is the relationship with all future husbands and wives. And it is saying that those husbands and wives that are to come, they, like Adam and Eve, will be one flesh. Even though they're not taken from a rib from a man to create his wife, but still they are one flesh. To have better understanding of this, we can look at the two places in the New Testament where this passage is interpreted. The first one we want to look at is 1 Corinthians chapter 6, where the Apostle Paul gives an interpretation of this topic. In verse 16, he says, "What? Know ye not that he which is joined," and that's sexually joined, "to an harlot is one body?" And then he quotes Genesis 2:24, saying, "For two, saith he, shall be one flesh." Here he's interpreting that one flesh experience as a sexual, physical intercourse that an individual can have with a harlot. This is not a person's wife. This is not someone they're married to. This is just through the physical encounter. And he's saying that through that physical encounter, where the two physical bodies literally become one physical body, in that way they are one flesh. This is important to note. However, this does not limit the interpretation strictly to the physical, because Jesus is the other interpreter of this passage in the New Testament. In Matthew chapter 19, Jesus says in verse 5, "And said, For this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh," quoting the passage. But in interpreting it, he says in verse 6, "Wherefore they are no more twain," they're no longer two, but one flesh. "What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder." Again, this is not because Adam's rib was taken to create Eve. God, according to Jesus, joins them together. Before that, they are two separate entities. They are one man, one woman, and then God joins them together. And when God joins them together, Jesus says they are no more two, they are now one. Jesus says this one and one does not equal two. They are not two, they are one. He's speaking here in the context about divorce and saying that this is not just an experience that happens during sexual intercourse. This is an experience that happens perpetually for the duration of the marriage. From the moment they are married, when God joins them together, they are perpetually one flesh. But of course, we know they are still two distinct, separate persons. They are still one person and another person. But Jesus says that they are no more two, but one. If we apply what Paul says, this gives us an insight into how they can be considered both two and one. In the sexual act, they are two separate bodies, but they are joined in a way that they can also be considered one body. So spiritually, emotionally, and by their affections, they are two separate individuals experiencing life individually as separate persons, but they are also joined emotionally, joined spiritually, joined in their affections, and in this way, they are one. And so according to Jesus, this oneness and this two-ness can be viewed in the relationship between the husband and the wife. Again, this gives us some insight into how God, in whose image man is made, may be viewed singularly and plurally, and can give us perhaps some insight into the relationship between the Father and the Son.